All right, here we go.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the podcast. So today joining us is Gregory Kunkle Jr., which is a candidate for the Texas 34th Congressional District. Born in Westaco, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here. And there's so many issues facing South Texas that we need to address. First of all, I want to offer my heartfelt condolences and prayers to all of those being affected out in Hunt, Texas, along the Guadalupe River, Kerrville. As a matter of fact, my family is vacationing on the Frio for the 4th of July right now. And we're in a similar situation with the rains, and you just never know how your life of children, a family can be taken away. Thank you to the governor, Secretary Noem, President Trump, everyone working, Texas A&M Task Force One, and Chief Kidd from the Emergency Management Response of Texas A&M University. It's amazing what they are doing, and I personally know people out there. Um, so with that being said, it's Texas is going through some heavy stuff right now. As much as I love the rain, but you probably just heard about the shooting in McAllen, targeting our Border Patrol agents. We have the flooding in Texas. We have the children that just tragically passed away in Brownsville from overheated vehicles, which is a safety concern every single summer in South Texas with our climate. And I just ask God to honestly watch over all the people, all of our officials, all the children in South Texas because it really is a special place.
Yeah.
I'm born in Weslaco, raised in Harlingen, Texas, blessed to go to Texas A&M University. I have a beautiful wife from McAllen, Texas, and four children that we homeschool and raise with God-centered American values, and we are blessed to be able to do that. And I'm running because I feel like there's not a voice for South Texas and Washington, D.C. There are so many issues going on. Right now, Joshua, I am praying that we do not get a devastating Cat 5, Cat 4 hurricane in South Texas.
Yeah.
Harlingen, right now in Harlingen, Texas, there are four generations of my family, the Kunkles there. My grandfather is originally from Indiana, and he moved down as a South Texan to retire, just like a lot of people do. My mother's family is from Mexico. She was born in Hidalgo. They crossed over at the bridge at Matamoros. And I am a border child born and raised. And I know for the past 38 years of my life, I've been watching South Texas, the beauty that it is. And honestly, like you've spoken with some of your guests, it wasn't until I left South Texas when I attended Texas A&M University did I realize what special and beauty we had there in the Rio Grande Valley and coming back. And I enjoy everything from the commerce and going to Mexico to the beach, La Playa, going fishing out in the bay, the agriculture, the hunting, the resources, the tacos. There are no other tacos like in South Texas. And trust me, I know I've traveled a bit. And the beauty of that place and how we are being forgotten in Washington, D.C., with the resources for hurricane preparedness, helping our people, the health of our people. I want to see the Rio Grande Valley. I am on the MAGA Maha train where I believe we need to reinvigorate the health of South Texas, where people just don't need handouts for food. They need handouts practically of gym memberships and exercise and training. But I know sometimes people do need help in doing these things. And I hope to be a voice in helping those people, bringing programs, bringing resources, and being an example with myself and my family for the Rio Grande Valley, South Texas, all the way through Kingsville. And that's why I'm running. So many things going on, starting with hurricane and flood preparedness. As I know, water is a big topic for you. I've watched a few of your shows and podcasts, and it's amazing to think, even right now, Joshua, water, not only does it give life, but right now, water even takes life. And I fear that in the Rio Grande Valley, if something like this were to happen, these torrential rains, Harlingen received the brunt of it just earlier this year, just in Harlingen.
Yeah.
But imagine the colonias, imagine McAllen, people along the river. If the Rio Grande, if the Arroyo Colorado rose, the Arroyo did rise to a record level for the first time ever. I have family that live on the Arroyo. I fished out of there. I mean, I wasn't actually baptized in the Arroyo, but I worked at Camp Perry in the Boy Scout summer camp there and spent every summer of high school in that water skiing, swimming. Unfortunately, I can still taste it right now. I know you mentioned that before.
Yeah.
But I still fear, what tragedy could unfold, the children, the elderly, people that could get hurt if a similar circumstance happened. And that's why I think we need to get to work. That's why I've worked with coalition partners on drainage. That's why I was at that meeting in Harlingen, Texas with Mayor Sepulveda talking about what we need to do to be prepared as we begin hurricane season now.
Yeah.
And so those are just a few of the issues, ongoing. And with that, I will answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of want to touch on the problems that are here that I see that from my scope, what I've researched, which is the Arroyo Colorado, the Rio Grande River, the air pollution that's going on in Cameron County. Our tap water is undrinkable. We got SpaceX here. We got two LNG plants. It seems like a lot of it is against the Rio Grande Valley, and with higher rates of cervical cancer here, higher rates of asthma in children. We have some rare cancers here in the Rio Grande Valley that aren't found anywhere else in Texas and the United States. It seems like a lot of it is against us here, and a lot of people I feel when I talk to them because I created a documentary and it was based off the next Hurricane Beulah that would hit us. So
Yeah.
1967, we got Hurricane Beulah. It devastated the Rio Grande Valley. We got 150 tornadoes. Like
Yeah.
imagine if we get that today. So we're overdue for Hurricane Beulah, and it's been long overdue. And I commend the RGV Coalition, a lot of people that are working on these drainage issues because our drainage issues are the infrastructure is just so old it can't handle any of this stuff. So it got me into the rabbit hole and I started researching Hurricane Beulah, what would happen to the next one. And then I started diving into the Arroyo Colorado. So every time it floods, these water systems they overflow, and all that overflow goes into homes across the Rio Grande Valley, into schools, into businesses, and it carries banned pesticides, chemicals that should not be there, untreated and partially treated wastewaters. There's so many things that are in there that have been known to cause cancer. So it
Yeah.
got me diving into it more and more and more. And I was like, it always stuck with me as like that question is like, why do we have so many sick people here in the Rio Grande Valley? And I just went on a mission to figure out how much education information I can pull from the internet because you know this the internet is a strange place where people will fact check you and they'll call you right out as soon as they think that you're wrong. But these things are public documents, they're studies, they're theses done by Baylor, by Texas and A&M, they're
Yeah.
government sites. And I just kept finding more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. I was like, man, like it does not end. So what I wanted to ask you is I can do great things of putting awareness out there. I'm reaching a ton of people. I've reached the entirety of the Rio Grande Valley twice already on Facebook and Instagram, and it happens over and over and over again. And I know people are interested in this subject, but I feel like a lot of people just they hear about it and then they go about their day. And then they hear about it and go about their day. So it really does take a lot of courage for people to tackle this problem. But what I'm trying to ask is, how do we fix it? Because this is the extent of my knowledge. I can push out the information and people keep asking me, how do we fix it? I don't have that answer. So I'm looking for people that can help us answer that question.
Yes, sir. And I can start by telling you right now, this needs to be heard in Washington, D.C. No one's up there, and you know what, Vicente, I'll make this bipartisan. Vicente Gonzalez as well as Representative Monica de la Cruz. They're not talking about the birth defects along the Rio Grande. My mother was a nurse of 30 years along the Rio Grande Valley. She actually passed away at the Laguna Vista Processing Immigration Center during the COVID surge. She was the first nurse there to contract COVID, passed away, but she's been a nurse her entire life. And she would tell me as a child working at Nat Medical Center in Harlingen that there was medical studies done, and I don't have the name of the study, please find it if you can, but along the Rio Grande River, all the way up to Laredo, further up, possibly El Paso, there is a significantly higher number of birth defects and child diseases that are from birth that are attributed to that river and the water. And the Arroyo is one of them, but we primarily get our drinking water from the Rio Grande, and it's been years in the making. And unfortunately, again, going back to the beauty and the devastation that can come with technology and life in the Rio Grande Valley. As you well know, the valley was founded on agriculture. You know, from citrus to cotton. I was told I had a great education at Texas A&M University. I got to take a lot of agriculture classes and learn about this. Even at Texas A&M, there is a beautiful creek called White Creek that they have a balcony on and rocks, and you can take pictures, and they have palms and trees. They turn into a magnificent flora site. And it is also an EPA Class 3 disaster zone
Hmm.
because at the time, the university had pesticide testing facilities where they were working on chemicals for agriculture at A&M. And they, at the time, they would literally just dump these heavy metals and chemicals into creeks, into rivers, let them running off. We've seen this across major cities, though, all across the United States, even in the Northeast. I forget the name of the river, it might be the Delaware, one close to Washington, D.C. or New York, but it caught fire because of the amount of chemicals, oils, and things being dumped into rivers. So this is a problem as old as urbanization of our cities. And the Rio Grande Valley is no different. We're a little bit later on the time scale, but all the agricultural runoff all the time has allowed for some of these chemicals, pesticides, things to be dumped in as waste. And as you well know, some of them are forever chemicals. Some of them are heavy and sink into the sediment. And that is what I believe we are witnessing today. Now, why is it that we don't see a natural cleaning of the rivers and the water systems? I actually have a pretty good background in hydrology, watershed management, wetland delineation. My background is in natural resources. That's what management. That's what my degree is actually in. And what I do know is that, before they made the Amistad reservoirs and Falcon dams, the Rio Grande used to flow, and it used to, whenever a hurricane would hit, you would have a gigantic mass of water. Again, unfortunately, water bringing life, water taking life in this past weekend. But water would literally flush out a lot of these things and create a pristine environment. Well, now that we have dams and systems that withhold that natural flushing occurrence, they stay there and they become residual and they become sediment and stay within the mud and the sediment aspects of those river systems. So, barring a gigantic flooding event, we're not going to see a natural cleaning, even though we don't dump chemicals into the rivers as much as we used to. There are certainly agricultural runoff and other things coming from Mexico as well. Without those types of natural flooding disasters, as we would call them, we are not going to see a cleaning out of the water. And the same thing for the Arroyo. I will say this, I got to watch your interview with the gentleman that was a previous TCEQ and a
Jim White.
previous. Yes, and it was a great interview, and I really enjoyed it. I love anything related to water resource management and him giving that history. A lot of it I had known before, and I did learn some things. And I will say this though, my family-in-law lives on the Arroyo Colorado right now, all the way down towards the park. And with this recent flood in Harlingen, the river was flowing significantly. You were watching boats and docks floating down at a very good speed, pushing that water out because Harlingen got 24 inches of rain, 30 inches of rain in a short period of time. And so, unfortunately, in my opinion, that's what it would actually take to create and clean some of these systems is essentially another Hurricane Beulah, which, it's a give and a take. We don't want that to happen, but that is a natural cleansing event from a water system perspective. Now, on the drinking water note, growing up here, I had a bunch of friends from Mexico. Again, my family is half Indiana, half South Texas, and my friends they would drink bottled water all the time from Mexico. I was like, why do you drink Culligan water? Why do you always drink in Ozarka? Like, I just drink water from the faucet, drink water from the manguera. I can still taste the water hose in Mercedes, Texas, at my aunt's house, where we would just be drinking out of the manguera. And I never knew though until I met some later on. I've done a lot of missionary work in Mexico. I was just in Torreon. I'm going to San Luis de Posse coming up in September with the mission trip as musicians with our church. And they all drink bottled water there because they consider the water not safe. And I didn't realize, people from Mexico coming across the border, my own friends and family, that they kept that same perspective. And in reality, in retrospect, it might be life-saving. I will be honest here and say that my family, we drink bottled water. And I truly believe that I am benefiting the health of my children looking at the water reports of what is in the water that I drink, where it comes from. And I've seen you post some of these reports from the city waters, of these chemicals, of these contaminants that are in there. And I fear, some of those things, we have to create a messaging that, maybe when it comes to long-term water drinking, if you're drinking water in a glass, which you should be, I highly encourage that. It probably needs to be bottled water at this point, or filtered water, reverse osmosis water, whatever you can. And it will cost a little bit more, but I do believe that in the long run, I am benefiting the health of my children and the health of people because of where we live, because of what we have seen. And I don't want to cast blame. It's kind of like right now with these terrible tragedies out in Kerrville. They're politicizing it. They are placing blame on funding cuts to NOAA and everything. I don't want to place blame on the past because of the past, the Rio Grande Valley is where it is today because of that agriculture. I've worked at a university for years, and I'll tell you one of the things that we learned when it comes to science, and please feel free to use this at the time. I've been told they make the best decision that they can at the time. And so in the 1940s and the 1950s, they didn't know what they were doing in regards to contamination of water, of groundwater deposits. They didn't know that we had sealed artesian aquifers that people would be drilling to in Texas later on, 50 to 100 years, and using those as drinking water in San Antonio. So because of the past, because of our future now in technology, I'm not going to place any political blame, any blame, but I do want to fix it. And I think with representation in Washington, D.C. from South Texas, we can get funding to fix things like the Arroyo Colorado. We can get funding and hold people accountable in Mexico that are dumping pollutants into the Rio Grande. And we also, maybe we need to help cities like Weslaco, Mission, Donna. Maybe they need increased resources from a water purification standpoint at their municipal water facilities. In College Station, when I was there, I can tell you, I lived outside of town, out of the city, and I was checking out my water. A lot of my neighbors, they had well water. They were drinking water straight out of their well. They would filter it themselves. And I even went, one day I saw a guy, he had a fire hydrant open and he was draining the water, and he said he was conducting a water test. And I was like, where does this water come from? And do they filter it or anything? He said this water, this was outside of College Station in the county, but this water directly came from an aquifer, unfiltered. All they did was add chlorine to get rid of any biological contaminants or pathogens that would be in it. But the water was so good from this particular aquifer, it was a very deep aquifer that they were using, that they were able to pass that into the system for homes and people down the road without any kind of filtration because it didn't have the contaminants and it was a sealed aquifer.
Wow.
Well, unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing along the Rio Grande, and we do need to increase awareness. We do need to bring this up in Washington, and we need to work with municipal cities, officials, and departments in getting that funding to also create a healthier water system for our people. Now, let me tell you one of the ways that we can do that. So let's add in drainage right there. We need, in my opinion, I know you just posted that the report from the Texas Regional Flood Office that I think 1.25 billion, 1.5 billion. I will tell you why I believe that number is wrong. I am starting at a minimum of 3 billion necessary to get some of these projects done because that report is looking at the Rio Grande Valley in its current state of population, size, and necessity of urbanization. It's not really taking into account the population growth in the future.
Right.
And what the projects that I want to focus on, what our leadership in the Rio Grande Valley has not been doing is what is the future for the valley? What is the future for South Texas? And we need to make sure that any kind of critical infrastructure that we want to support, that we want to fund, that we look into the future of our children, our children's children. Some of these projects, if I were able to turn a key and get $3 billion to fund a drainage hurricane project across the entire Rio Grande Valley, that project probably wouldn't be completed for 20 to 25 years, and my grandchildren would benefit from that. But someone needs to get that started. And I even think with today's technology, you mentioned SpaceX. I believe we have the capacity, the engineering. We're going to Mars from the Rio Grande Valley and Boca Chica. Well, guess what? We can also fix some of these hazards in our water systems. We can provide clean water to people, and we can certainly drain water. And if I could do it perfectly, Joshua, this is the dream right here. We create a system where we capture the rainwater from the next Beulah, from the next hurricane. Imagine if we could capture that water and then use it for drinking water, for agricultural purposes, for municipalities, trying to capture and reuse the water instead of just letting it all run off into the Rio Grande, the Arroyo, the Laguna Madre. And that is what I believe we can do. We have the technology, we need the funding, but we also need the representation for these kinds of ideas, these kinds of projects, and the future of the people of South Texas.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right because the Rio Grande Valley is supposed to double in population by 2040 to 2045. So if we don't do something now, that means that we're going to have double the amount of sick people. And there's already 17 hospitals in the Rio Grande Valley. So that kind of already tells you something that there's a lot of sick people here. And when I say that and I talk to my younger friends, they're like, they kind of look at me dumbfounded, like, well, I don't see it. But I guarantee you that my mom goes to the doctor all the time and she says, there's so many sick people there. It's like, you're right, you're right. There's so many sick people here. But I do also want to touch on the tap water once again because the cities are notorious for not wanting to work together. And these are not my words. I pulled this from other sources saying that cities simply just do not want to work together. They're against, well, not really against each other, but they don't the line of communication is cut off sometimes, right? So with that being said, would a like a coalition, how do coalitions work? The RGV coalition, like for example, for the infrastructure, the drainage, how does that work? Does that take into account each city voice, or how does that work?
Well, okay, so starting with the drainage, and I'll come back to your topic on the municipal water supplies. So, looking at a master drainage district for the Rio Grande Valley is nothing new. New Orleans has one, Houston has one, Austin has one. It's called the Houston Watershed Management Agency, something along those lines. It was created in 1950 because they had a humongous flood that flooded the entire city, caused hundreds of deaths and millions of dollars of devastation in the 1950s. And they decided to create a regional drainage district. It's called the Houston Regional Drainage Watershed. And you know what? I'm running as a Republican. I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm telling you right now, I never want to add new taxes. I never want to add new fees. But I do believe when in the creation of a RGV watershed management district, that essentially would be a tax to anyone that would be in that district based off of property taxes. But I do believe, I am for fiscal conservatism, but that's what taxes should be paying for. It should be paying for critical infrastructure types of projects and programs that benefit all people. And I am willing to go and try to get that done. That one does start at the Texas legislature. We would need the Texas legislature to pass a bill creating another regional flood district, basically. And then federal funding can then go into that at that time. So it's a multi-step process that the RGV Coda is actually working on now. And that was part of that meeting that we were at.
Okay.
So that's what it looks like essentially is building the coalition for information. We would have to get it into through our Texas representatives, senators, as well as Texas reps that are local to the South Texas community. And then once it's passed, we'd be able to start funding large scale projects in drainage. Now, on the municipal drinking water side, it's a little bit different. Municipalities follow federal EPA regulations and guidelines. And again, going back to some of your water reports, you're well aware when you see things like arsenic or uranium in water, and funny, just as a side note, if you didn't know this, there is water, natural uranium in the groundwater of South Texas. It's a natural phenomenon. As a matter of fact, some of the uranium that was used in the Manhattan Project for building the first atomic nuclear bomb came from South Texas. They would have these water detention ponds where they would pump water out, they would let it evaporate and collect the sediment, and that's how they got uranium during those projects all the way from South Texas. So I do believe when you see something like uranium or radioactive elements in the water systems, that is a natural occurrence, and there's really nothing you can do about that. But some of these other ones we can certainly filter and look at, but municipalities have to follow the guidelines of the regulations set by the federal government. Now, let's say your arsenic level, like you've posted, is 4 times, 6 times the recommended or allowable rate. What do you do? Are they going to cut the water supply to the entire population? No, they're not. And it's unfortunate that essentially by law, you have to let the people know. You have to tell them and report to them. And they may get fined. The feds could issue fines to municipalities, to cities. And that's part of the reason that working with drinking water across a larger scale, if Harlingen was going to try to work with Brownsville, if McAllen was going to try to work with Mission on water, they essentially might have to answer for each other's problems as well from a financial perspective, which is again, your taxes from your local community pay for your municipalities, you're paying the bills there. So I do believe there should be some individual aspects of the water supply. The freedom of choice. If you don't like Brownsville water, maybe you want to go to Harlingen. If you don't like La Feria water, maybe you want to go to Santa Rosa. We have the freedom to choose where we get our water from. You also may be able to have to pay a little bit more for that help, but I think that is certainly worth it. I do believe we need the coordination on the drainage aspect. I do not think we will be able to see a municipal drinking water type of coalition because those are just regulated by the municipal government
Gotcha.
as well.
Okay, so let's stay on that subject because, for example, when you were talking about like the drinking water and there's arsenic and uranium in there, for a lot of people, they just think that it's common knowledge, but it truly is not because there's 150,000 people that live in colonias in Hidalgo County alone. A lot of them can't afford bottled water. And I get this all the time because on if anybody wants to go through any of my social media and on any of the posts, any scientists, any doctors, use it as case studies because people are freely sharing their stories. And there's to this day people that still drink tap water because they just assume that it's safe. So it's not common knowledge, and this is where I first figured it out because I went to a flooding event, and they asked me to speak, so I gave my whole spiel, right? And I can only assume it was somebody that worked at the water company, and he kind of scoffed at me as like, "Well, everybody knows that there's arsenic in the water." Well, that's not true. Like for me, I didn't learn about this until March 27th, until I started diving into it. So I feel like I'm aware of a lot of things, and I simply was not because I'm not looking at these water things, right? Because I
Yeah,
just assume that you have tap water and it's safe to drink, you're paying for it. So you're assuming that, yeah, sure, it's safe to drink, it's safe to cook with, but up to March 27th, I don't know, I'm 43. So a lot of people that are younger too, and this is the perfect example when I go to the gym. Some of my stuff went viral on Instagram, and these younger guys are coming up to me and thanking me for talking about these issues because they understand specifically that this is going to affect them long term.
yeah,
So a lot of times I feel like I'm not reaching the right people because I have a petition right now and it shows exactly how our human rights are being violated. And I only have 3,000 signatures. And the truth is, there should be 82,000 signatures because there's 82,000 homes and 300 facilities that lie directly within the Rio Grande Valley floodplain. So a lot of times I get disheartened, like, am I doing this right? Am I reaching the right people? Is my message not strong enough? But it's like when people come up to me at events or they reach out to me online, they thank me because I feel like if I stop talking about this, I'm not going to be able to reach that audience because right now I'm reaching them. I'm reaching a lot of people, so I'm very aware that I have to post more stuff every single day and make sure that it's fact checkable because as soon as I lose that credibility, people will just tune me out. So I do feel like it's a responsibility to be able to keep talking about this, to bring people like you on and try to figure out and have these conversations about how we fix these things. Because, like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a toxologist, I'm not a chemical engineer. For all intents and purposes, I am not credible, right? So the thing is, I have the trust of the constituents here of the Rio Grande Valley because I can reach them and put it in a way where they understand it, like me, right? So I can take these
yeah.
56 pages of documents and break them down to where a dummy like me can understand it, right? In bullet points. So I feel like a lot of people need to be on that journey because when you start talking about this jargon, people just get lost. Like you're talking about these water reports, these consumer confidence reports that are sent out by the cities. Nobody knows how to read them. Like
That's right.
I
Yeah.
had to dive into it and learn each little line and like, what does this paragraph mean? What does this paragraph mean? So
Tetrahydroline DCA3
yeah, it's
colon,
like
like what
yeah.
what is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I have to put it in a way where it's understandable. And another thing too is like, Westlaco for years had thousands of times over the limit of arsenic that was allowed, and now this newest report it showed that their levels are regular. So how do they do that? Like we want to know how they did that. That way we can go over to the next city and do that exact same thing through the Rio Grande Valley. And then another thing too I want to talk about are the PFAS, like the forever chemicals, right?
Yep.
Why is it that they don't have to talk about these or they don't have to report these things? That's one of the things that I feel like should be talked about because in McAllen they found these PFAS in the water in the Arroyo Colorado. Like, why don't they have to report these things? These are like some of the most dangerous chemicals that are known to cause cancer.
I can certainly look into that, and PFAS are not my specialty either. I'll come right back to that. But starting with the arsenic. So I was told by a professor one time, and it was a great line. During the King Cotton times of the 1800s in the United States, every farmable acre in the United States of America grew cotton. That's why it was called King Cotton. And even on the Arroyo at that time in the Rio Grande, they had barges of cotton that would go up and down and would take it, and the cotton would go around the United States or around the world. Even at the time of the Civil War, they would take cotton from the Rio Grande Valley and take it up north along the East Coast to the Virginias and the Carolinas. And what ended up happening later on is they found out, if you've ever seen the cotton harvesting process, they have to defoliate the leaves of the cotton field. That's when you see a cotton field and all you see are the white bolls of cotton on there. They spray a defoliant, which is a chemical that kills the green and the leaves and allows it to fall down. Well, I don't know for how long, I mean, possibly 40 years, arsenic was that defoliant. And so, for the most part, anytime you're seeing arsenic in a water system or a water table below ground, it's from the years and years of agriculture being used in cotton and it, flowing down into the water system. Now, arsenic is water soluble, which means people do it. If you live on a golf course, that's how they make golf courses stay so beautiful. They spray an arsenic-based type of herbicide that kills all the weeds except for the Bermuda grass and other grasses that are there. And literally, with rain or the sprinklers, the arsenic molecule attaches to water and goes and drains in the soil, and it goes wherever the water goes because it's water soluble. So maybe it flows into a stream, maybe it flows into the Laguna Madre, maybe it flows into the groundwater system. So I will look into the Weslaco case as well. But if they had significantly higher levels of arsenic and it is now dissipated, it honestly just could be from the timing of that arsenic has now left the system from a water transport perspective. Whether it's the Rio Grande and we're not using it and it's flowing out now, or even in the groundwater, maybe that aspect of the amount of arsenic that was in there has now dissipated over time from pumping, from more water infiltration coming through. But I do know for a fact that the arsenic that we generally see is from the years and years of agriculture going on in the valley across the United States. Now, going to the PFAS, again, this is a scientific error that no one knew at the time when these new chemicals were coming out that they were being used. And I will say this, one example I like to give now is the ozone. If you haven't looked it up, check it out. But for years, for about 20 to 30 years in the late 90s into the millennium, they were talking about the hole in the ozone that was created by CFCs, that was created by the use of mostly in condensers and refrigerators, AC units. There was a chemical of CFCs that would create a molecule that floated into the air into our ozone and created a hole around Antarctica. Well, that hole is now gone because they actually banned the use of CFCs in our refrigerators, in our air conditioning system. And it took 20 to 30 years to accomplish that. But once they found the problem, science was able to create a solution. And now the hole in the ozone is gone. Like people thought we were going to melt the ice, that we were going to die, and it is now returned to a healthy system, which is good for us. I do believe the same thing with PFAS. It was a time when we did not know the hazards we were creating, and it's going to take time to get them out of the system. Now, there are ways, it'll take money. It'll take funding. For instance, if there's a bunch of PFAS in the Arroyo Colorado and the sediment at the bottom, we actually have to dig and dredge that soil out. And I've been told, basically the part of the drainage coalition was talking about the Arroyo actually has years of sediment built up. Was when it was originally dredged and used as a water drainage area, it was, I believe, dredged to like 30 to 40 feet. It has so much sediment that's built up over the years because they don't use it as much as a shipping channel that there's about 15 feet of sediment that has built up, 15 to 20 on the base of that. And that's where you find those chemicals. So it would literally take hands-on deck programs and projects of getting that mud, getting that sediment out. Where do you take it from there? I don't even know. But that's what it would take is literally the removal of these areas. I saw when y'all were talking about the Donna Lake and the electrical equipment that would release PCBs out there as well. It will literally take a physical action of removing whatever the contaminants are, the contamination soil. And you know what? Our government has actually set up programs for this. The EPA, it's called the Superfund, and that's where they go into ecological disaster areas, which the Arroyo Colorado is not technically one. I did hear this. Check this out. I worked at that Boy Scout summer camp, and it had been there. Camp Perry's been there, I think, for 100 years now. And there was a time between the 40s and the 50s where they would not allow the Boy Scouts to go canoeing, swimming. They couldn't go in the water because it was considered an ecological disaster. They have since cleaned that and allow kids to go into the water to this day. I have gone canoeing, sailing, water skiing in those waters as a child as well. So things have been getting better since the initial disasters. But I do think this is where federal agencies like the EPA and the Superfund come in. It will take tax dollars, but this is where we come and clean and leave a better environment for our children, our grandchildren, and use modern science to be able to do it.
Yeah. I got a couple more questions before we finish off the podcast. So
I thought
let's
we're
just
just getting
say,
started, Joshua.
let's just say, for example, like me that have this petition, right? And what are like the steps where I can go like because right now we have 3,000 signatures, we're concerned citizens. As soon as I have 10,000, I take it now to the lawmakers, the legislator. What does that look like? How do I get our concerns in front of the people that actually make the laws, that make the decisions? How does that look for me?
That's what I'm doing right now. And I'm really literally running for Congress on drainage for the Rio Grande Valley. I think that's the number one critical infrastructure facing us. I pray to God we don't get hit by a hurricane this season. And I will say it on here. I do not believe Vicente Gonzalez, Representative Vicente Gonzalez, he's been there in McAllen in Texas 28. He's now in Texas 34. What over the last 20 years or 15 years that he's been in, has he done for drainage in the Rio Grande Valley in a hurricane? I know we haven't gotten hit, but we need to prepare in advance and we need to hold our leaders and our representatives accountable because afterwards, everyone's going to be saying thoughts and prayers. People are going to be losing their homes. Nobody in the Rio Grande Valley needs to lose their home. Our children do not need to be in another flooding event. I know families in Harlingen that have flooded 3 times in the last 5 years, replacing their sheetrock, hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. And it's not necessary for that to happen if we make the appropriate decisions now. It's going to take time, but we need to hold our representatives accountable. With the petition, that is a great start. And these issues need to be widespread with the message being shared. Going back to drinking water, honestly, I'm a big fan of the Make America Healthy movement. I want to start the Make South Texas Healthy movement because it's hard enough, Joshua, and you know this, you're going to the gym, working out, staying healthy, just getting people to drink water in general is hard.
Yeah.
My mother was a victim of it. She loved Diet Coke. She loved sodas. I mean, I love Mexican Coke, I try to not drink them as much as possible. Coca Mexicanos are my favorite. And just getting people to even drink water is hard enough. Then we're like, okay, but you got to watch out for the water that you're drinking. Does it have the arsenic? Does it have the uranium? Like, So it is very much a messaging problem. And I think we have to create coalitions of people around health. They need, when you respect your body, God said our body is a temple. And when you respect your body and treat your body well, you know the benefits of that. Exercise, eating healthy, drinking water. When you do that, you care and you learn more about how to make your body healthier. And you want to see that for others. I want to see my children work out later. I want to see them be healthy. It was too, my mother passed away during COVID and it was too late for her. I often think like, could I have done more? But now as an adult and a father myself, I need to make sure that my children understand the necessities of being healthy. And I think the same thing comes across when it comes to drinking water and spreading these messages about checking what's in your water. Maybe it means you're buying bottled water and you got to sacrifice the Pizza Hut or the Little Caesars night. I'm being honest, not that that's probably as healthy for you either, but this is where choices, and one of the victims of the circumstance here is time. No one is thinking about how this happens over time. You and I both know it. We live in a very small time scale where the latest story that pops up on our feed, we're following that. We're not keeping track of the heavy PBA chemical, the PFAS that are in our body and what that could possibly do with cancer later on. No one's thinking about how they may get cancer from their drinking water later on, unfortunately. And maybe we need to make that a message to hold municipal districts accountable, to hold water providers accountable in what they are telling their people. Maybe they need to increase the messaging and we need to hold them accountable that way. But it definitely starts with leadership. I commend you on providing these reports, on telling people things that they don't know, because I do consider myself, educated, and it's hard for me to even follow and stay up to date with them. So trying to relay that message to the masses of the citizens of South Texas is a hard job, but we can do it. Just watching more recently the FDA get rid of food dyes in foods and drinks. Look at that step. Well, now maybe the FDA needs to look at arsenic in water or PFAS in ground areas and contamination of urban zones of South Texas. And I think we can do it together.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's one of these things like people, I get backlash for it all the time. It's like if this was such a public health crisis, why haven't you released the documentary so everybody can see it? Well, the thing is, I'm from the Valley. I get Valley people. Like I am like them. I am one of them. So I know as soon as you give them something, they're gonna take it for granted or they're gonna view it and then push it off to the next thing. It's like I'm not naive either, right? I get that people have to go to work. I get that they have other problems to think about. They're not thinking about drinking water every single day. And in all transparency, I go to sleep thinking about this issue. I have nightmares about this issue. I wake up thinking about it. I'm thinking about it all day long, and I cannot get it out of my head because it's affecting the Rio Grande Valley. And I have a job, like I have a real job, this is what pays the bills, right? But when I take time and learn these things, it's kind of heartbreaking. And I want to go back to the point of how do we fix this? So the immediate way that we can help ourselves right now is to get a filtration system with reverse osmosis, right?
Yep.
Or a filtering system that can filter out a lot of these things. The next problem that we are going to fix is going to take 15 to 20 years. So can you kind of touch on that one more time?
On the drainage aspect or the drinking water aspect?
Drinking water and the drainage, because it kind of goes hand in hand, right?
Sure, sure. Well, and in running for U.S. Congress, I'm looking to the future of South Texas. And again, being blessed to be down there, I left, I came back. I actually got to work for AgriLife Extension in Cameron County, right in San Benito for years, working with farmers, working even with the you've probably seen some of them, but they are part of the Better Living for Texas organizations, and they provide healthy foods and recipes. And there are people across various agencies of Texas that are trying to promote a healthy lifestyle. So a few things. First of all, like you said, it's going to take a coalition of people and knowledge. And we essentially have to make being healthy, eating healthy foods, eating healthy water, and investing in drainage a trend. It has to become trendy. It's not going to be sexy, but it has to be for the benefit of our children, for our livelihoods, for homes. We need to make it almost a requirement that like, why aren't you drinking more water? Why aren't you eating healthier? Why are you giving your kids those sodas? It might be a little, ostracizing. Don't tell me what to do with my children. Well, I want to see, I'm telling people across the Rio Grande Valley, I want to see the benefit to all the children, all the families of South Texas. So it's going to take people being vocal, people being leaders, people being examples. Nobody's perfect, and no one's going to be the ultimate, health guru, water enforcer, or anything like that. But if we can raise awareness and have enough people supporting the ideas, these things can happen. I mean, here's an example. I swear that South Texas invented hot Cheetos with cheese. I've never seen that anywhere else. Like that spread like wildfire. It's a trend. I love my mouth's watering right now thinking of eating some hot Cheetos with cheese. And and why can't we do that for some healthier things as well? I'm gonna still keep eating hot Cheetos with cheese, but I want to also drink a bunch of water with that also, and want people to do the same. So same thing with drainage. I think that these projects are going to take long-term timing, so we need to get the people speaking about them now. I know also, some people are in higher grounds. I follow a page called Magic Valley Chronicles. If you follow that one, he always posts old pictures of the Rio Grande Valley in the early 1900s. Looking at downtown Main Street in McAllen in 1915 when there's still citrus orchards there. Looking at San Benito downtown whenever there was a parade and it was on horses and carriages. My neighbor, I grew up in Harlingen, and my neighbor, his family, his mother moved to Harlingen in 1950s, and she called Harlingen and Brownsville a tropical paradise. And I ask you today, is there anyone calling the Rio Grande Valley a tropical paradise? Why don't people want to come to the valley? The snowbirds, the winter Texans, they found the secret. They know about coming down here. It's a good retirement place. But we also suffer from the brain drain, where both of my sisters left South Texas. They moved to Houston. I have a lot of friends, almost all of them that went to a university or college. They left the valley and they never came back. I honestly look at it as one of my missions in utilizing what I've learned for the benefit of South Texas and creating that change from going to college, from being educated and wanting to see better for the people and using what I have learned to do that in Washington, D.C. and building those coalitions. Some more future things, Joshua, that I anticipate doing. Here's something new for you to check out. Like talking about the population growth. We're going to need more water. We're going to need more electricity. I am right now about to start a new coalition, the Coalition for Nuclear Energy in South Texas. I believe that new nuclear with small modular reactors, it's a clean form of energy. It's the same kind of power system that you would find on a submarine. And they've been using them in the military on submarines since the 1950s was when one of the first nuclear subs was put. It is still out there today. They're going to be using them on space systems as we become interplanetary, as we go into space stations. They're not going to have generators of diesel or gas or even solar panels. They will have those combinations, but nuclear is going to be necessary for large scale population areas. So I want to start building a small modular reactor plant for power production in South Texas as soon as possible. That kind of project, again, will take 25 years to get done, where even just our grandchildren will see the benefits of having that electricity. Well, then what's after that? The water necessary. Our water contamination, honestly, Joshua, I'm not seeing it getting better anytime soon because we share that with the border of another country and we can't regulate what they put into our water.
Right.
So I do believe we need increased filtration system, reverse osmosis, desalination along the coast. As if we get another major drought, people, I remember in the last couple years where Donna and Weslaco, their water resources were running really low from a municipal perspective of just the drinking water. So I think we also will need to invest in critical infrastructure for water desalination. The highest cost of desalination in RO systems is the electricity necessary to do that. And that's where the nuclear energy production comes into play. And Joshua, if I could do it long term, if I could get all of this done, of course, it's not going to all get done in one shot. But the way I see it, we'll be selling water and electricity to Mexico in the next 25 years. raising capital and getting funding for our system and our people if we develop and plan this right. But we need these kinds of ideas in South Texas in our representation. And that's why I commend SpaceX too as well. I know there are some problems there. Not everyone, Brownsville, Harlingen, they're 50-50 split on liking SpaceX or not. I do believe, though, that the technology associated with going and becoming interplanetary, the resources that they bring, I believe it is a once in a thousand-year type of opportunity. A child from South Texas, just like me, growing up along the border, eating lonches and progreso, they could be eating lonches on Mars, Joshua, coming up. It's crazy for me to think of that. And even myself, I grew up fishing at South Padre Island, the jetties, Boca Chica. I take my kids there and they see rocket launches. Like they know South Padre Island as Rocket Beach. And you and I just grew up, eating at the pavilion of the Isla Blanca Park and playing in the
Bologna
hot sun,
sandwiches and
having the seagulls taking your sandwich out of your hand right when you're there. And there is so much potential for this place. It is beautiful. We have groundbreaking, world-renowned things going on, but we do need to secure some of the critical infrastructure such as water, power, and drainage as well. And that's why I'm running. I'm not trying to be complicated. I know people want to talk about SNAP funding and they want to talk about taxes and a lot of things. But for the Rio Grande Valley, I think we need to start basic with looking at the critical infrastructure, hospital systems as well. We're going to have an older population coming up. We're going to need more funding for hospitals for taking care of these people. And I am happy to see some of the things going on again with the Make America Healthy group and that's been pushing. But now we need drainage, we need power, and we need representation of people who care about these issues and making these things heard in Washington, D.C.
let me talk to you about this idea I had and tell me if it's just stupid or dumb, whatever, right? So I was thinking about Elon Musk, right? We're allowing him to do business here, launching rockets out of SpaceX. Uh, would it be a good idea to say, hey, help us fix the Arroyo Colorado? It's going to cost $1.3 billion today, right? That today's numbers. Help us fix that. Give us the money and then fix this one problem and then launch your rockets over there, right? And then, because he's making billions of dollars doing this stuff for SpaceX, right? Is it a far-fetched idea to reach out to him and say, hey, help us out in return for you operating out of the Rio Grande Valley? Because the Rio Grande Valley is 1.4 million people right now. It's going to double in population. He's still going to be operating out of here. So I would say a healthier Rio Grande Valley will be a happier Rio Grande Valley. And then people will stop yelling at him and bitching at him because of everything that's going on over there. Is that a far-fetched idea?
I don't think so. Now, I would approach it a little differently. I would say instead of asking for the direct funding, Elon Musk's a businessman, kind of like Trump. They like deals, they like business. Elon, I consider myself along politically more on the Elon side of I love technology and innovation. And that's what we are trying to do. America is brilliant. That's why we won World War II. That's why we have B-2 bombers. We innovate problems. And so what I would tell Elon, and hey, if you have his phone number, Elon, you're watching, let me know. I need some campaign donations. Actually, that's a far-fetched idea right now. He's not going to be helping me probably, unfortunately. But I digress. I would approach Elon and say, let's innovate these problems of water and health for the betterment of the community. And then we take those ideas and can use them around the world. I'm being serious, Joshua. For instance, cleaning the water, filtration systems, reverse osmosis. It is a cost prohibitive idea because of the amount of electricity, the cost of doing it. It doesn't work in a business case. If someone can invent a methodology that is financially viable for reverse osmosis on a large scale, that can go across the world. The entire world is growing. They're going to need more water in Asia, Europe, Australia, Africa. They may not have problems now, but as the population across the earth increases, they will need more water no matter where you go. So actually creating and innovating some of these problems, like cleaning the arroyo, even imagine we had a large scale active filtration system that takes drainage water from crops and other things, puts it in the arroyo after it's been filtered or something along those lines. I know that's a far-fetched sci-fi type of idea, but now we're landing rockets back from the launch pad as well, which was a sci-fi idea 20 years ago. So
Right.
that's how I think we can approach it, is creating the innovation, the ideas, and the business case for that. And I think he would go along because guess what? When we go to Mars, they're going to need water. They're not going to be able to bring the water with them. There's ice on Mars. So even in part of Elon Musk's going to Mars idea, he will need to produce fresh water for long-term sustainability on the community he wants to develop on that planet. So why not start here in South Texas as a test bed, as a development part? And I think that's how we can do it with him.
Yeah, since you touched on the future of the Rio Grande Valley, I'm huge into AI. I'm huge into robotics. The future world is here. I use any tool possible. Like I got access to ChatGPT in November 2022, and I was using it so much that it sent me a message saying, "Hey, go outside, go touch grass, get away from your for a bit." It's an interesting world that we're living in, and I talk about AI and the use of AI a lot because it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's going to be the people that know how to use AI that are going to be taking the jobs. And I talk
Right.
about this all the time in the Rio Grande Valley, and people are like, "Well, you depend on it too much." But I don't understand that why somebody wouldn't want to use a tool that can help you think 100 times faster, research 100 times faster, come to some conclusions 100 times faster. It just makes you competitive, especially if you're from the world of entrepreneurship like I'm from, right?
Yeah.
It's just it would make sense because all the stuff that I'm putting out today, I wouldn't have been able to do 5 years ago because I'm using the tool AI to be able to get this stuff out into a way where I can learn from 56 pages of documents. But I want to get your opinion on the future of the Rio Grande Valley, what it looks like with the artificial intelligence.
So that's another thing. I didn't even get to the economic aspect of my business plan for the future. Those are just the critical infrastructure we're discussing today. I do believe two things that I want to see in the Rio Grande Valley, and that as are you in Texas 34? Are you in your McAllen
Yeah,
15?
I'm in McAllen.
Okay, well, I may not be representing you, Joshua, but I can tell you, your friends, the people listening that are in Cameron, Hidalgo, Willacy, Clayburgh, all of them, that we need new business in South Texas. I've talked about desalination. I've talked about new nuclear energy. Two more things I think we can do. Data centers. For one, for sure. Why you see them popping up everywhere. They're building data centers in Austin. They're building them
Yeah.
across Texas, the United States. China is building data centers like crazy because that's where the AI processing is going to be going and being housed. So, two things about data centers. A, it takes extreme capital input to be able to develop something like that. And you need the power to also power these data centers. That's where the nuclear energy comes into play. So for the Rio Grande Valley, I think we need to have someone trying to draw large scale companies to the Rio Grande Valley and to create data centers for the future of some of these projects that you're talking about on the AI realm. As well, I believe that South Texas, we have a history of manufacturing in the Rio Grande Valley as well. In Wessico, I remember Hagar and the Levi's factory out there. We have Fruit of the Loom in Harlingen. They used to produce textiles in Harlingen for years out there as well. And then we have the Maquinitas across the border from McAllen and Hidalgo area. Why aren't we doing manufacturing of components here? I want to see semiconductor manufacturing in South Texas as well. They talk about semiconductor manufacturing across the United States. It occurs in and you probably know this very well. It occurs in Taiwan. It occurs in Asia because they invested the government capital to build those plants. Well, guess what? We saw during COVID that from a national security perspective, getting all of your chips and computer sets from across the seas is not going to be a viable long-term sustainable plan. So why isn't South Texas fighting for companies to invest in the capital, in the infrastructure of building semiconductor manufacturing data centers in South Texas? I'll tell you why. Because our representatives aren't there demanding that and finding those companies and courting them. They talk about the Harlingen Mall, how it's going downhill and we're not attracting any new business. We need to be attracting all new businesses, space increase entrepreneurship, data centers, healthcare innovation. We need to be looking at all these mainstream, large scale types of initiatives that are we see on the news every day, and we need to be demanding and courting companies making the deals. I commend Judge Cascos at the time, Governor Abbott. They made the deal to get SpaceX to Boca Chica. That was the last time that that deal was passed for that to occur. Well, we need to be making those kinds of deals with Panasonic, Fujifilm, Amazon. We need to have these kind of data centers and large scale companies investing in the Rio Grande Valley that'll produce jobs. We have the manpower. We have the people that work hard, the hardest working people in the Rio Grande Valley. Let's get them higher paying jobs in technology and manufacturing. And that way we can elevate all the people and providing opportunity. Those are some of the business and economic aspects that I want to work on in Congress is making those deals. It's going to take some funding, it's going to take some back and forth, but I think it can be done. And just like you said, AI is not slowing down right now. Technology is certainly not slowing down. So we need our representation to be up there fighting for us and bringing these kinds of initiatives to South Texas.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right because I'm a huge proponent for technology. Like before all this water issues and before I was diving into any of this, it was blockchain technology, it's AI, it's robotics. I was just fascinated with that world because I just see where it's going,
Yeah.
and I spend a lot of my time in there. But you're right because the future is great for the Rio Grande Valley, and I think we should be one of the people or one of the regions that takes advantage of all of that and bring all of our people with us because it is a huge problem with education and information. But with AI, it makes it a lot cheaper and it makes us able to access a lot of these things inexpensively, and we can reach a lot more people, especially with the like the all the people that live in colonias. It'll help us figure out how to serve them better, right? Because it's just it's daunting to see the numbers that are here. Like I shared earlier, 150,000 people live in colonias in Hidalgo County alone. So a lot of it's education and information that we just need to give them. That way they can make better choices in the future. But before we finish out the podcast, maybe you can say an outgoing message to our community before, and also how they can reach you.
Yes, sir. Please, if you're voting in the upcoming primary election for Mark, I am running to be your representative. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. Vote for Gregory Kunkle on the upcoming ballot in Texas's 34th Congressional District. I want a better future for our families, for our children's. I want cleaner water. I want more electricity. I want more jobs. I want more space flight. And I want to see the Rio Grande Valley grow just like it used to from the agricultural years that started this wonderful place. You can contact me on my website. Go to gregorykunkle.com. Please follow me on social media. Donate to our campaign if you can. Campaign season is just rolling up, and I am ready to take on anyone. I am taking on Vicente Gonzalez in the Texas 34th Congressional District because I do not believe that he is looking out for the future of South Texas good enough. He needs to be fighting for these projects, for this funding, drainage. I am certainly concerned and pray to the Lord that we do not have another Hurricane Beulah that occurs anytime soon. And I will do my best to fight for South Texans to be as passionate as we are today in making sure that our voices are heard on what we need. Because every single day we are paying taxes. Every person in the Rio Grande Valley is paying taxes when they buy something, when they get paid, when they go to work. And these taxes should be benefiting all the people of South Texas, red, blue, white. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what religion you are. We need to invest in the people and the infrastructure and making sure that our children aren't hungry, that they do not flood, and that they have clean drinking water. It's as simple as that. And that's why I'm running. So thank you so much, Joshua, for the time today. And let me know if you have any questions or any way that I can serve you all.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we shall see you soon. Gregory, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joshua.
Bye.